There he is. There's his bowl cut. We'll get him a suitable Primaris helmet at some point here. Okay, so I'm going to learn a little bit about the stuff that I like to use. Now, I have a lot of Citadel product. This is actually one of my many kits. I have about 4 of these, 2 of the black, and I have 2 of the tan. And depending on which time you got it and how full it is, you can see this one's fairly empty. Got other ones that have a lot more stuff in them, but this one's been my travel kit, which is why it doesn't normally have X-Acto knives and other stuff in it. And usually if I am sending stuff like this, like if I'm traveling for the holidays, I usually like mail this postal a couple weeks out before I get there, so I have one where I need to be. So I got 4 tools here out of this. My other kit, one of them is used for 3D printing, and it is stuffed full with all of the tools I use for cutting, measuring. I even have a calipers in it. So I've got a couple of these. Another one is just worn out as can be, but it also has stuffed with so many things. So this is a little lighter, but some tools you can see I got here. I like Tamiya Files quite a bit. The half round is really my go-to for 95% of my modeling work. Now, this is the tool set that I get. Pretty simple kit. I have probably no less than about 6 of these. I use them for 3D printing, cleanup. I use them for hobbying, and they'll last a lifetime if you treat them well. The rubber's about the only thing that goes out on these ones. If you get them too moist, they will actually get rusty. So that's one of the great things for those silica gels. Another one of the tools, Citadel's mold line remover. It's actually one of my favorite tools. Yes, you can use the back of an X-Acto blade. I tend to find that the clutch on X-Acto blades tends to get a little soft just by constantly getting the torque. This thing is so durable, like 1.5 millimeters thick. It just does a really good job, and that allows me to keep my blades for other purposes. Now, you'll also see that I have one of the older Citadel X-Acto blades, and this is a fine product. The only downside I have of this project is the spring inside of it can break if you drop it. I've gone through at least 6 of these. I got one with each one of these bins, so I had 4 of them just bought as part of the kit. I dropped one day. It was only about a month old, never came back. Other times, the rivets inside can break. It's also a really, really sharp blade. They're medical grade, but you have to remove the blade. It's inside of a little clutch, and you're having to bend the steel on a sharp blade. It almost always ends up with me bleeding. That's the only downside we really have to these things, is how dangerous they can be if you're not careful, which is why a nice handy X-Acto blade works great. Somewhere in here, I've got, it may not be in this one, but somewhere in here, I may have just the standard GW equivalent. By the way, love their pin vise. They have their files, and they're incredibly polished, but they're great if you're needing to polish away a lot of grooves. But if you take one of these and you just go against the grain, I find that almost anything can be polished away just with this. So really, when I'm modeling, as much as I'd love to say that I use an entire kit, if I'm just putting a plastic model together, cutters, I like the Tamiya cutters. I've had GW cutters, they work really well. They do have a clutch that tends to break. I've gone through maybe 2 Tamiya cutters in my lifetime. Their only downside is they have the little tiny spring at the bottom. But they work really well. The only downside I have is I tend to get some skin pinched in here if I'm really working a long day. But they work well. This is what I have in the kit right now. But the GW, the nicer sized ones are really great. Again, if they drop, the spring is inside and they've had that break before after only a couple of weeks. So this is 4 tools. You don't need much. Okay, glue. I'm a fan of the Tamiya extra thin cement. The green bottle, there's also a yellow green bottle, which is super, super fast. Smells like nail polish remover. This stuff is my go-to. It just works so dang well. And everyone I've introduced this product to swears by it. It doesn't have a little applicator nozzle that ends up having to get cleared. It just has a little brush. Brushes can get a little gross. The only downside is as the liquid gets really low, the brush will not reach the bottom of the liquid. But if you don't care about the murkiness of it, when you get to the bottom of one bottle, you pour it into the other bottle. This thing goes away and goes into retirement. If you really cleaned it out, I suppose you could use it for something like airbrush paints or something like that. But I tend to get 100% of my bottle. I just pour the contents of one back into the next and keep going, keep going, keep going. So that's what we got here. It's gonna be kind of fun to get into a model for the first time in about a year. The reason why I didn't hobby for a year is in part because I've been moving back to the Midwest, which is where I was born, from California, where I lived for 20 years. I also lost a pet cockatoo last year, Perry. She got lead poisoning when COVID started. And so I did 7,500 miles driving back and forth from the Midwest to California, trying to save my cockatoo's life, trying to pack up my condo to put it on the market, work, life. And so time gets away from you. And if you love a hobby, make some time to do it. So I'm excited to see what these are, but let's just get to it. I'll probably end up editing a whole bunch of this out later anyway. But okay. Be shocked if there's more than one sprue. Yep, this one sprue, a couple little doodads. I'm not entirely convinced yet on what I'm going to do for basing. These look like they're 25s. They're not 32s. If they are 25s, I may end up swapping them out for Necromunda bases. And if they're that odd size that GW introduced, 28s, they are 28s. The 20 is an interesting thing. I think it's actually better than the 25s. It's a little more stable, but not as big as the 32s. Maybe that's something they're planning on changing everything over to. The first models I had that used those were the Sisters Repentia. In fact, if I go and get one of my Sisters Repentia, you can see as I said, we might reduce this down for time. So this is how I've been putting Necromunda bases in conjunction with the newer standard 28mm base. So Necromunda has 32s, they have 40s, and they have 25s. So this Repentia sitting here has her 25mm base, but you can see it's almost the exact same size as the base here. Little 2mm magnet at the bottom. This is what I'll probably end up doing with Gaunt's Ghost. Mostly because I'm having a fun time putting all of my Primaris, all of my sisters, all of my new armies that are 8th or newer, basically since Necromunda came out, I'm giving them Necromunda bases, so they look pretty pretty fun and pretty consistent. Now, the only reason I wouldn't go for this approach on Gaunt's Ghost, they have fairly wide stances. And if sometimes, like this fine gentleman with his autocannon here, you can see he's going to pretty much be base to base. I suspect that if I do this approach, he may not really want to sit on there nearly as well. Maybe it's close. Maybe we can cheat it. And if we can cheat it, maybe he deserves to also be bringing the Emperor's light to the Hyde world. So we'll see. But I actually like this base size. It's just they don't release another product that has the same consistency. So I'll probably have to do something about that. But yeah, we'll get to that at a certain point. I guess we're starting right in on Gaunt. You can hang out over there. Okay, so apologize. I'm going to kind of have to work within the space here, trying to see what the size is. I kind of framed it out earlier, so we should be pretty good. Okay, we start with 13 and 14. And there he is. Okay. Most of you watching this, if you are watching it, are probably going to know how to use the cutters. Point is, if you haven't, you want to have the flush side of the cutter towards the sprue. Okay. It's going to push the plastic away from the model. I try to hug it as close as possible because I'm going to get as little of a nub. If you are worried about getting a little pull-out point where it's going to create a divot, another solution is cut farther back and then work your way forward, or even cut just a little bit in and then just use the file to bring it down, especially if a sprue, depending on the manufacturer, if a sprue has their little, divot right on a surface that is going to be hard to clean, just pull back a little bit from it. Which is what I'm going to do here. And then you got the little nubs, and then I can kind of feel it. But the most important part of that is I can go through. Now I tend to not to like cut in this way. I'm a little too aggressive if I do it. But if I go backwards with the blade, and you say you could use the mold line, remember? Yes, you could. This is really good for going after mold lines. The actual blade itself, I don't know what the physics of it is, but I often find that if I use the bladed side going away from it, I'm a little more delicate with what I'm removing. This is a great brute force tool. A little bit more of a precision tool, and especially for these aren't cheap models. You want to just kind of get it. Now you can see I left a little bit larger of a spot right there. Now I'm also doing one of the worst things you can ever do, which is putting the blade up against my finger. I've gotten accustomed to it. I tend not to run it back and forth too often. And because I'm usually keeping my thumb on the blade, I'm not actually cutting across my skin. There's no contact between the blade. My thumb is basically the guide for it. Kind of creates almost an A-frame between my fingers back here and going across the model. You can kind of see it's off the edge of my thumb, and I just line it up where I need it, and then I can control it. And my thumb is still touching the model, so I am really just using my thumb as the pivot point. Right. Okay. Now, bottom parts like this. I could cut this way. Again, it's a very likely way you're going to cut yourself. These weren't really areas where I needed to keep them that long. I did it more to show you what you could do. And if you want, you just, a really nice aggressive file, fraction of a second, it's done. And the way this glue works by melting the plastic, if there's a little divot and you can still feel it, you won't even notice it because the plastic itself is going to get melted by that. Now, this part here is going to take a little bit more time. I want to make sure I'm just not a little too heel aggressive there. Okay, now, another way of doing that is run your blade over the whole surface until it goes pretty flat. There you go. Okay, now some of you might just say, cool, done, moving on. Mold lines. The nubs are the biggest part, and I'm hoping this lens can do a pretty good job of showing it. Our mold lines, 2 pieces of plate steel came together, plastic was injected through it. It all pulls apart, and at that pull line, there's a chance that that high pressure has made plastic go into the mold line. If you've ever seen a really old sprue or one that's gone through a lot of pulls and it made an unclean print, sometimes you'll have a little bit of flash off to the side. Not too much with these. But I like to go through, and like right here, I can see a little bit of a mold line that's like right along that area there. Now, how aggressive do you want to be? Now, if you're doing something where you're going to have a lot of attention on your model, like you're doing something for competition, then you might want to have a little bit more time and attention. If you're just putting together a horde army, let's say Nurgle, or a bunch of orcs, or Tyranids, or something like that, where you're just going to have lots of bugs, lots of critters, lots of bodies on a table, and you're just playing because you want to have a quickly painted army. All of what I'm doing here is wasted time. I could just for really quickly just cut, make sure I don't have any nubs that are occluding the glue point, and then just glue and go. Some people will do that, and then they will go and do their flash removal later, because then they only attack the areas that they see. This is more like a therapy thing for me, and I'm a little bit obsessive about this, in part because I just like having nice clean models, but we could be here all day with this. So what I'm really looking for right now is just following along that line to see if I can see any other areas where I need to. Now, when I took off that little bit of sprue nub, that already got that little section. Now, the other place that I'm notorious at missing is inside the legs. And usually you'll find those. Now, on old guardsmen, old Eldar guardians, a lot of your older plastic models, you can get some really aggressive lines inside the legs. With old Space Marines, I wouldn't even do this. I would literally just take something like this. And with old guardsmen, I would just start with this, and I would just very aggressively just scratch. And you can kind of see what that does here. It just runs over the surfaces. I'm going to miss them inside the little creases in there. But is somebody going to be looking under my model, looking under the base to notice, is my paint going to hit it? And if the answer is the paint's not going to hit it, or you're never going to see it, who cares? So really, I mean, it's your hobby, but it's also your time. Now I'm spending a little bit more time here, getting inside this little area right in there. I can still see there's a little bit in there. Now, sometimes you can be a little bit overwhelming on some of these models, and then you realize later, oh, that's not even a piece of detail. That's a part of, the bonding point or something, and then you kind of make a hole. That's a good piece, pretty ready. There's probably a couple little areas on something like this that I could go after. Frankly, that's more than enough. Now, do you take all the sprue parts off at once, or do you do it one at a time? Now, here'd be my take again. If you are working on a very straightforward set, like old Space Marine that are modular, their arms are designed to glue on, it's really hard to screw them up, then you're going to be fine. cut his way, and you could probably just do all the legs at one time, do all the torsos at one time, do a really kind of aggressive, uh, quick build pipeline. But if you're dealing with some of the newer models, like the one-off builds like this, there are other pieces in here. Here's a guy with a sword. There's another just a sword up here. This isn't too bad, but there are kits where, like AdMech, the Adeptus Mechanicus Skitarii troops have their legs are just a little bit different. You can put most of the legs together, but the legs only fit into one set of cloaks. So if you build all the cloaks at one time, build all the legs at one time, you're going to run into these parts where they don't really fit too well. There's other models where very specifically this leg has to go with this arm, or this torso has to go with this cloak. And for those, if I'm doing a batch build, what I'll usually do is, let's say I'm building 80 Skitarii, I will probably build model number 1 8 times in a row, because then at least I can just batch cut them all off. I know they all fit, and I can just do them really, really quickly. It's a little more monotonous, but then I don't end up with that problem later of which piece fits with which body, and then you end up with one that doesn't work. So with these type of characters, these kind of mono pose, heroic posed characters, it's a little bit too much like a jigsaw puzzle to just cut them all off the sprue at one time. And so, in my opinion, take that extra little moment. Now, Gaunt doesn't have a whole lot of pieces here. So at this point, okay, I could probably have cut all of Gaunt off. But if I start cutting Gaunt and this kernel here, if I cut them all off, I'm going to be wondering which cloak goes to which. It's going to get me confused, and I will probably at some point miss a part. It's also a chance it can fall on the floor, and then you never find it. So I can just finish cutting him off of here. Again, it's your hobby, so you'll figure out what you need to do here. I tend to build armies en masse within my local community in California. Usually I had what was called the rule of threes. I almost always bought models or boxes of things in threes, so you'd have to get 3 of the new tank. I built 1 Imperial Knight and then realized I needed a whole house. So Sisters, Adeptus Sororitas, I ended up making a rule of 4s, which meant by the time I had all my starter boxes and all the original stuff made up, I've got a pretty sizable force of them. I tend to like big mob armies, which is kind of weird because, you know, it takes a while to build a big horde army, but there's something kind of cool about putting 100 guardsmen on a table and kind of challenging your opponent to shoot them all off. Now, gone are the days where you could have the hard guard and you just use, you know, Dark Angels, Chapter Masters buried into a squad so everyone gets an invuln. I mean, that's really nice. They've gotten rid of that. But it was kind of fun to watch a player try to shoot your army off the board and not only invulnerable saves on top of invulnerable saves on top of feel no pain. It was kind of a fun time period, but you know, those are the things I think the hobby has to change for competitiveness. But you do. I tend to like story missions better, and I've had more fun losing games when there was a really fun story involved in the loss, and you come up with your own rule type 7, than when I won. I'm not really into the competitive thing. I love the stories that come out. I love the process that comes out. And so with things like the hard guard, it was never really about winning. It was more about, I'm going to make sure that they cannot take this objective, or I'm going to make sure that they cannot take out my friend's treehouse. And you know, guard doing what guard do, stand and die for the emperor, right? Or gloriously not die, as the case might have been there. So I get in here. Um, one of the things I'm noticing here is there's a small little area on the edge of the kernel here. I'm not sure if it's meant to be there or not, but is that just the sprue cutoff, or is that actually like a part of the, there's some scraping that's in here. I'm trying to keep this in shot for you guys. First time we'll see how this setup works. This is an evolution of my teaching rig. Normally I'd have a camera sitting over my monitor. I'd have my lights coming in from the sides of the monitor. Here I've got my light above shining down on us. So we get some really nice, clean and easy to see features. But it is a first attempt and we might have to make it. I know that I'm getting a little bit of fill light, so hopefully not too much reflection. And because of where I'm setting it up, I can't look at my live feeds. So we're just gonna see how this works the first time. You may know of a concept called 3-point lighting, where you have a fill light or your key light, you have your fill light, and you have a backlight. Okay. In this case, I have a ring light just above that's acting like the fill, kind of giving all of us a fill here. I have the key light over here coming into the scene, and I have a backlight over here. That's the thing that makes the reflection that you're probably seeing from that light. Now there's also a light, and I don't mean to get out of focus here, but there's also this is a macro lens that actually has an LED on it, which is why you can see it stays very bright as we get up there. There's also some ambient room light here. Benefit of having a bit of film production kit is you can use it when you need it. So the ring light's actually suspended from a C-stand right now. And so it kind of looks like an alien mothership hovering over it. But the nice part is you guys can then see all the little mold lines, because it's not just me sitting here talking about something you can't see. Frankly, the way this lens is, you probably have a better angle on it than I do. And I apologize if I'm taking a little bit of time here. If we have to, we'll edit later. And over time, my goal is to get better at this. So now the interesting thing for me is I've been a professor for 20 years. So usually when I'm talking aggressively on a subject of interest, and we have a very limited amount of time to get through it. One, I'm not thinking of this like a class. And two, since this is something I would consider a joy, and I love what I teach, but because this is something more of a joy, I can already sense that I'm doing a little bit more of my own impersonation of Bob Ross. Very chill, just kind of enjoying the process of putting together these guys. And if that becomes the vibe, then that becomes the vibe. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I love what I do when I'm teaching, but it's a different energy because you're usually on an aggressive kick trying to get everything put together and done within a small window of time so you have as much time for questions and answers in the lab as possible. It'll be a learning process. Okay, so we're gonna get to the gluing phase. And this stuff, if I open it, I wish there's a way through the web for me to allow you to smell this. If you want to do smell-o-vision, very much like the old John Waters movies, just go buy some of this from like, First Hobbies if you're in California, or honestly, Hobby Lobby or any other hobby place that might have it, or you get them off Amazon. But and then whenever I open mine, you open yours, and we'll all just be kind of experiencing the Tamiya together. So one of the cool things about modern GW plastics is because all of this is CAD engineered, they've gotten to the point, and you can kind of see it here in the model, the sword kind of fits into a notch. Some models are better than others at this. One of my favorites was a Custodes, Guardians of the Emperor. It was one of the bikes, and they have a little sword on the bikes, and you can't actually see the divot on the bike seat. But when you put the plastic sword up and slide it in, there is an angle where it just fits. It is a little type, it's some really cool design and engineering, but it's also a little bit of magic. So now you can see there's the liquid. It kind of sits in pools. Two ways of applying this material. One is you can do it. One is you can do it by, I am having to figure this out. One is you can press fit it and then glue it later. And some of you are probably screaming at me going, how dare you put it together that way? Well, I dare because it's been a while since I was putting together models together. So I'm a little out of it, okay? The other way of doing it is kind of press it in there like that. And then I usually like to apply just a little bit around it. And some of you might be going, you're melting the model. Now, if I press against it, my fingerprint will actually get embedded in there. You can see it kind of pools around it, but I'm pushing away from the model and I'm just letting it find its way. Like I said, it's your hobby. You can do it how you want. There are times where I will press fit them together and then I will apply it and it will capillary action. The liquid will literally channel through everywhere to get all over the model. But there's also times where I can see where the mounting points are. And the nice part about this is it melts fast, but not too fast. So I can just go over this and just effectively see where the pieces fit together. Okay. And go, oh, well, and what that does is guarantees that I'm getting some glue on it, and any of the glue that gets into like an open cell inside. One of the cool things is that glue is still evaporating. That glue is going to continue evaporating through the plastic model. So what it does is effectively it's melting the model from within. So it's getting to all those areas as the vapors are going through the model. So sometimes I don't mind pooling a lot inside the model because it's not like it's going to stay there. It reacts to the plastic. It will evaporate into the plastic, through the plastic, and glue eventually just make its way to either soften the interior, which I don't care about, or it will make its way all the way out through the model and I'll eventually get a nice tight weld. But I'm not going to leave it right there. I'm also going to take some of the liquid on it, and you can see I can just run it into the channel and it will literally run through the capillary down through the model. Okay. And it'll eventually seal things up. Okay. And eventually you'll see like little bits of liquid here. Now you don't need to use that much, but that's going to become a really nice tight weld. Just make sure I'm not touching an area that's got any shininess to it. Okay. Wait, do we want to do the arm first or do we? Well, it doesn't matter, but okay. I'm going to apply a little bit to the arm area. Take his arm. Now this is a pretty wild shaped arm. There you can see the seam where it lines up. And then what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this and just hit the bead so it goes into that little area. And a little bit more on the bottom, a little bit right in between the cloak. Now the cool part about this process is already bonded. It's quick. This is just, it's such a rad product. And other manufacturers make similar versions to it. The Tamiya just has the best flow control. Probably should have put his head on first, but And he's also got this cloak that he's wearing with a big old collar. And he is fairly, he is fairly bent forward as he's doing it. But the most important part is if I look at him straight up and down, his head's pretty straight up and down. There's a nice little line between the back of his head there. Okay. And you can kind of see him there. He's like, you know, he really is kind of forced all the way in there. Now you can also see they actually took that pin vise and they screwed into the bolt pistol there, and they also did the side rivet there. So it's got a little bit of oxygen going through there. But that is, there's our Gaunt. Now he's going to fall forward. Pretty good. Now, I'm not sure. How does he fit on? Probably could actually fit pretty well on that if I want to do that. Another thing that's nice about that, it makes it looks a little bit more exciting. Now, he is on a piece of wood. What's a piece of wood doing at the bottom of a hive? If I decide to do this, I may have to put a little bit of other crap on there to make it look like it's kind of queued up. There's also another base product that came out a couple of years ago, a different Sector Mechanicus base. And that one actually has bits of dirt. It's got mixtures of aquila, dirt, soil, some blasted little stuff. That might actually work better than these, and they still kind of match up because they're still science fiction. They're just not Necromunda bases. So we might do that. And okay. Colonel Colm. So he's going to have 8. Now I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. I'm going to go right to the edge of the sprues, unlike with Thomas are there. And it doesn't really matter, like I said. 7. Hey, look at this. It's like he's a Disney employee. He knows to never point with a single finger. Always make sure to point with 2 fingers or gesture with a hand. It's like he grew up working in Anaheim. Okay, there's 9. No, 9 and 6 look very close, but here on 9, I can kind of see that it's the wooden piece. Okay, and then what do we got? We got his bayonet las gun. And if I'm missing the target, I apologize. So I need 11 and 10 on here. What I mean by missing the target is if I'm not getting it inside the camera where you can see it, I'm a little sorry. Again, lining up on the target. I know it's kind of in this zone, so I'm trying to get there. Then we have a little bit of his top hair, which is number 10. Oh, there it is. The crazy thing is that we literally are at a level where they just have a little bit of top hair. That's one of those I have to be careful not to lose. And that should be everything. So let's just go at it. By the way, you notice this was open. If you're not careful and you don't make sure to seal these, I have had them leak all over a bunch of bits. Lost a whole bunch of bits that I guess I could always use them later as something mutated, but they all got melted a little bit by it. The fumes alone will just melt plastic just by proximity. The other problem is it can tip over fairly easy. It's an expensive product. It'll take the finish off of anything almost immediately. So if you're not careful, you can take all your lovely wooden furniture can suddenly be completely stripped. If you're somebody that has some really nice, expensive furniture from a nice place, you could be in the doghouse for stripping your wife's, antique table or something like that. 2 fingers here. Now, I usually like to hobby by day. It's still daytime, but technically I'm not getting any daylight because I'm in a basement. Um, but I usually like to hobby by day. Mainly I like having more light to see by. Um, my condo in California was beautiful daylight by day, but the only light I had that I could work from by night that was strong enough was a 100-watt ceiling fan bulb, one of those very large aggressive halogen bulbs. Um, it would give me plenty of light at night, but it would make it feel, just because of the radiant energy, like it was about 10 degrees warmer in the house. So I'd just be sweating while working. So I tended to only want to work by day and generally by daylight, just because it's a little more natural. But I'm actually liking the way that these lights, they're big flat panels. This is like a 1-foot panel by a 1-foot panel. This one's a little dimmer, mainly because I didn't want to have a lot of glare. But it's still enough that it picks up. You can kind of see it still picks up the edging on stuff. And those of you who are seeing it through it can see the reflection straight against the surface. And it's reasonable. But that ring light that's above me is actually making it really easy to see the mold lines. Now, these are kind of delicate little one-off characters, but in one of the next things I'm going to be doing in the future, I've got a whole bunch of Sororitas that came out a couple weeks ago. I have a couple Sororitas tanks. I have 12 of those. Oh, they're big, like big mechs with Sororitas in them. Names. But I'll probably be batch building those. Like, there's 3 in a box, so I'll probably be putting 4 of the same 3 together just so that I can batch build really quick. And you'll see a different pace from that than what I'm doing here on these little one-offs. Because I know I'm never going to really see these unless I decide I want to put another box of Gaunt's Ghosts together. I'm probably never going to see these characters again in terms of these little mold lines. So this is one of those type of builds where, because it is a one-off, you're only getting that one experience with it. So it's not like putting together a whole bunch of guardsmen where you learn the kit backwards and forwards by the time you're done putting 80 together. By the way, you can tell you've built too many Imperial Knights when you can start doing that, because you know every piece and how they fit together. Those who haven't put an Imperial Knight together, they are kind of a glorious kit. There's only 1 or 2 places where I have a little bit of design pet peeves in them. There's some places where you can see the original low resolution 3D model in the shoulder plates, and they've got little facets in them. That bugs a little bit, but it's a glorious model for modding. Lots of contours. Sometime I'll bring them out and show you guys the models. I did a Forge World had a version, a red metallic version. I made mine all in that red metallic. A lot of airbrushing, but just really fun to be big enough that you can use the airbrush effectively. Really fun for putting decals on. The decal sheets are solid for that. Just a fun kit. So yeah, we're getting there. This dude and his little bit of mist for his hair. Want to necessarily clip his hair off, but I do want to find where it is. Okay, there's one mold line right there under his jaw. That one's not too bad. But what I don't want to do is remove a whole bunch of his hair that later on you're like, wait, does he have some like catastrophic wound up there? I'm hoping that the rest of his hair is going to cover it a little bit. Right, Mr. Dude? Yeah, Mr. Dude. Okay. Now this one. I'm not sure where the cut point was. Oh, is that it? I think that's it right there. Also, if it looks like my fingernail's really dirty, I was doing some weeding today outside and it was raining. So pulling up thistles, and you can clean your fingernails, but at some point it was so caked in there that I had to get running off to another thing. Okay, well, I don't want too much of his hair to get there. He might be having a bad hair day when this is all done. I don't want to take too much off in case it's supposed to be there. And so what I'm probably going to do, and you can see the little part right there. I'm going to line it up, put it together, and then let it dry before I have to. And sometimes the glue will actually be a little bit of the saving grace on this. Oh, there it is. I think, oh, that's. Now, when I was a little kid, we had, the models weren't nearly as good, but also my fingers were smaller than, I'm fairly tall, and the German and Scandinavian going here. So I picked a hobby, which is all about, little fine details. And here I am, this big oafish ogre. And it'll work. Now the cool part is the glue is already kind of melting that plastic there. So I'm not going to use my fingernail, but I'm just going to kind of run over it with my fingernail. There is a little bit of an indentation there. I think the paint, when it eventually gets painted, will cover it up. And like I said, it might just end up looking like a little bit of a bad hair day. But I can probably also just take a little bit more paint over it, or some black paint right after I prime it, and just put a little bit more over there. And like I said, he might look like he has a bad hair day, but it won't be too bad. But you can see he's got the cool little comb over there, and he's got his bangs. Okay. Now, they don't really tell you which one's which, so I'm hoping there's not any weird overlap here, but which one should you apply first? Again, I'll probably never need to put this character back. Now you can see there's like a weird like seam. It looks like it's a cut line, but those are actually, that is how the designer made those offset grooves there. You can see both of them, right? Those offsets are designed. That's literally the ratchet point. Like it does not want to twist out of that. It's really cool what they're doing now, where they're literally building almost like a cog and gear kind of mechanism. It looks almost like a flush thing. That's just power of 3D CAD design being done at the top of its game. And it's so secure that there we go. I can literally see the cement has kind of capillary actioned out from it. A little bit of a gap right here on the back of him, but it's sitting solid. And by the way, that gap on the back, oh no, I can worry about it. I'm never going to see it because it's going to be behind the cloak. So at this point, I might as well. And now, why don't I glue the cloak this way? The real simple reason is this. I could glue the entire cloak. It's going to be really hard for accuracy, but it's much easier for me to see where this is going to make contact back here. So it's just easier. And you can see there's liquid inside that channel. That liquid inside the channel will evaporate out. So it's going to evaporate through whatever holes and allow oxygen to go through. But if it can't, it's going to go into the plastic, and eventually it will evaporate out. And then that plastic will just be further bonded. Ta-da. Okay. Now, if I want to make sure I've got just a little bit more, I can come back in here to like where the sword, the little combat blade comes out, and I can do some little tiny things like down here around the leg. Secure. Okay. That's the cool stuff about this glue, is that it just works. It works really, really cleanly. Now, this gun, I'm not sure how connected it is to the rest of the body. It has a little connection right here that's got some like zigzaggies. Again, you can kind of see the zigzaggies. Okay. But what I'm doing is I'm seeing, yeah, it does lock into somewhere else. Okay, it locks in to his body. So you actually can see the negative of his body impacting here. This is one of the other cool things about how they do this. They're using the shape of his actual torso to be the negative on the gun. And what's cool about that is if you're ever kit bashing these guys or putting them together, you don't have to worry about sculpting this anymore. You know, so let's say somebody gives them a big old sword and has like an inquisitor or something. Well, you don't have to worry about sculpting this because they've literally made some part of the sculpt, even if it's wasted when this comes on here, it'll just fit perfectly. So I could literally just go through, put glue on that little negative space area in there, and I will know that when this locks in, it just pushes. And some people might say, man, Lance, you're gushing too much about GW. And look, GW is making some of the best miniatures from a design standpoint on the market. Not only do they have a really strong intellectual property, their IP, they've been working for 40 years to make it really cool, now 35. But the other side of it is they're using, their CAD designers and their modelers are using modeling techniques that are at the top of their game to just put together really, really state-of-the-art builds. So like they're using the line of his cloak goes into his jowls and his cheeks perfectly. So am I gushing? Sure. But as a person who's taught product design, this is one of those products where there's so much you can learn about how to do 3D product design, sprue design at a top tier level by just looking at what they're doing with little plastic models. And yeah, they're little plastic models, but they're engineered like precision devices. So do I gush? Heck yeah, they've earned it. Okay, so for those that are critical that, oh, the cost is too much. And by the way, this is not a cheap kit. These 5 models are like a $60 box. Now, why is it so expensive, you say? For them to engineer just one of these, okay, to make the stainless steel die for it. And prices change. $50,000 on the low end to $100,000 for a stainless steel injection molded, tooled piece of 2-part stainless steel. And that's assuming it's only 2 pieces. Sometimes it can be more. The reason why they get expensive, not only do they have amazing flow line control to know how the liquid plastic is going to go through it, but basically you have these 2 plungers right here and everything had to be pressed out from these 2 locations. But also, in order to get this out, you have to cool it. In order to cool it, you need something to help it cool faster. So they often have pumped coolant going through the machine, usually water, but pumped coolant pipes that have to be built and engineered into those things. Like I said, $50,000 to $100,000 to make stainless steel dies. So they're having to not only pay the artists and the designers to make this, the engineers to line it up so it's going to have perfect flow control with consistency, okay, to mitigate loss. Then they're having to go through and build the device, the injection mold. Then they're having to put it all together, make this little piece of plastic, make all the brochures, put it in the box, ship it to every one of their retail stores and do all that. And if you take the cost of what this product is, independent retailers are going to buy it for half of that. So cut the cost down by half. And now that's how many of these, let's say if it costs $60 and you buy it for $30, at $30 per sprue, how many do you have to sell to recoup for all of that cost to bring it to manufacturing? I get it. There are people that want the hobby to go back to being a low-cost hobby. I'd love that too. But this is a boutique product being made at a really high level. And in case anyone hasn't noticed, if you've ever had a problem with a sprue and you don't remove the piece off the sprue, like if there was a broken piece on this, I could literally go back to Games Workshop. They would send me that part or a section of the sprue. One time I actually had them send me an entire rebuild of a sprue. The idea that they would do that not only for people buying from them retail divisions, but from anywhere is fantastic. They are concerned with wanting to make sure that people get a quality product. And so, yeah, it's expensive. Anyone here golf? How much is a golf club? How much is a golf membership? How much is a single outing of golf, depending on where you're at? Here in the Midwest, a single round of golf can still be $40. You go to someplace out in Southern California, membership dues, everything else. How much is it for an annual pass to Disneyland? Hobbies cost money. And look, if you're in a place where you can't afford an expensive hobby, I understand. But when people are critical and say, oh, this company is just, they hate their customers. I don't see Games Workshop hating their customers at all. I see Games Workshop making amazing products for their customers, developing some of the best quality product you can for their customers, and doing so many. These are Gaunt's ghosts. They're not, you don't build this army times 10. You build one of this because they're just some guys from a narrative story. They have some rules for in-game, but that's it. We have plastic Gaunt's ghosts. They have a plastic Primarch. Every time somebody complains, it's only a matter of time before they go and make the thing that the person was complaining didn't exist, therefore kind of appealing to their fans. Sometimes they're even trolling their fans towards that end. So, look, am I a fanboy? Heck yeah. But they've also earned it. I got into this hobby in 1988 with a lead LRD cannon and a Marnius Calgar Space Marine captain that was just sitting there looking cool in his chair, and I painted each one of them over again about 10 times over until I just completely destroyed all details because I was a little aggressive in trying to scrape the paint off. I can remember when Space Marines were toughness 3. This is the hobby I've had now for 35 years at least. I guess I'm showing my age, but it's a fantastic hobby. And it went from being just some cool thing with some cool little models, which nowadays we'd say look dorky, but I just remember looking at them and thinking these are rad, being such a deep franchise with so much lore. And there's some better people out there for describing all the lore than I. But I have students that have asked me about Warhammer and why I love it. And they've said, where do I get started? And I send them to a couple of other sites that have some really good lore craft being talked about. And they get hooked. And then they start reading the books, playing the video games. Um, Funny thing is, I love the dystopian franchise, even though everything about this universe is horrific. And in real world, yeah, I'm not a fan of fascism or of any other, really dark, violent, warmongering kind of ideals. But well, they didn't my fiction, probably because it is fiction. Um, it's a super fun hobby with really cool looking models, and getting a little bit of that hearing me do this here. Normally, my friends would say, "Man, Lance, you're so dang exciting when you start talking about Star Wars or anything else. What the hell's happened? You're so calm." This is what the hobby does for me. It chills me out. Makes all the little voices and all the little things that are going on in my life and all the 1,001 little things I got to do when I'm not doing this. eh, I'm putting together my plastic models. And that's just what I want to do. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting hearing this later and going, man, I do sound like I'm like, I don't smoke weed, but I'll probably sound like I smoke weed when I'm doing this because I feel chill doing it. And I can tell that I'm not giving the same oratory I give in class. But that's kind of cool. And hey, if this hobby just gives me a different chance to reflect on uh, on who I am, fantastic. What the heck? Does this person have two hands? Oh no, they got their gun up. Okay. I saw two hands with knives and I was a little bit, one's his scabbard. By the way, notice that. So dang accurate that they actually have the sword and the scabbard can actually fit together. Like, that's ridiculous. Like I was saying, this has always been my kind of place to focus, to zen out, make my grim dark and totally calm in the grim dark. But it's cool. Well, it's just I've seen some people that love to just get really aggressive with their models. I just get into a zone with mine. And spending the last 2 decades in Southern California, where you get up at 4 in the morning, drive to work. I would drive to downtown LA, 55 miles door to door, and 4:45 I'd be on the road. Get to work if I was lucky by 6, but if there's bad traffic, I might not get there until 6:30, 6:45. I'd sleep in my car for like an hour or so, then go and do office hours, and then do a 12-hour day. Teach 2 or 3 classes a late night, have the Caesar salad from the little commissary at the school, trying to eat healthy. Like Caesar salad, that's not good for you. Well, it's a lot better than Panda. Um, I can't eat Panda at my age, so frankly, I don't think anyone can eat Panda at any age. But the little dude in his head, the fact that we have heads that are so vividly depicted is just incredible. Okay, but I'd get up so dang early, get to work, sleep in my car, teach all day, office hours starting at 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. when my first class would start, then teach a class, then look at this stuff, just pockets together like effortlessly. Um, and then come home to that four times a week. And if they decided they wanted to have Saturday meetings, I'd be there 5 days a week. Always exhausted, just drained. And there's nothing worse than LA traffic. When you drive through it, you feel tired at the end of it. But then I couldn't dream. I couldn't go to bed because I'd just have these just ridiculously kinetic dreams where like I would dream that I was getting into car accidents, or I would dream that stuff was constantly interrupting me or somebody was cutting me off or something else. And so then I'd have to go and do something like play Battlefield for like an hour or two. So you go and do a whole day worth of something, and now you're playing a video game that's ultra violent. The interesting thing, and it might go along with this hobby, I'd play Battlefield, some other game, blow stuff up, sleep like a baby. It's just weird. Like, I don't know. I don't think there's like when people, the lie is that Dungeons and Dragons is gonna turn you into a Satanist. I had family members that tried to do that garbage, and I've had people that try to use the it's video games that make people violent. No, they don't. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to speak for everybody, but video games have never given me a single violent thought ever. In fact, they help me to just detune after a commute. They actually make me chill out because you just blowing something up with a in Battlefield or in some other game, and then just now I can sleep like a baby. I don't know what it is about it, which psychologically is somebody could probably tell a lot better than me what that pain is that just needs to unwind like that. But it's just that was my routine for 20 years. And I love my work, so it makes being a workaholic pretty easy, but it's unsustainable. And the nice thing about where I'm at right now out in the Midwest is 15 miles. It's going to take you about 15 minutes. Now, is the Midwest for everyone? No, but I was born in the Midwest. My family's always been here. So, most people go to other places for their holidays. I'd always come back here. I don't know. It's home. And for those that get it, awesome. For those that don't, hey, there are some people that's not what they're wired from. Some people need the city. Don't get me wrong either. I miss parts of California, especially my friends going down to San Diego and then just having fun conversations like in near the beach or going to one of our favorite places for a beer and just talking Star Wars all night or whatever. Check at stories and ideas that we were working on. Dude, this guy's short. Oh well. I guess he's the same thing, but it just feels kind of short compared to the big poses. It's a it's around here I get to look at birds. It's summer right now, so birds from a bird feeder becomes kind of like the action mode. But I used to have a bird named Perry, so I used to have a bird in my house. So I've changed to having a bird in my house for having a bird, like a dozen birds outside. And number 20 here. Okay. Oh, you're talking about the intensity of things, and probably my brain just said, let's not talk about these things because that's stress you don't need to think about. But I'd be doing this at home and I'd have a cockatoo sitting on my shoulder. Or occasionally I'd have to give my cockatoo the rest of the sprue, and she'd just start chewing up corners of sprue. Never give her this because she'd eat all the good parts. But give her the sprue, she thinks she's getting the biggest part, and she just chew it all into little tiny pieces of plastic on the floor. But it's just a different pace of life. And you meet people in the Midwest, they say, oh, I'd never live in LA. Well, the interesting thing is I just described a very stressful view of LA because it fit with the narrative. But there's also been so many fun and chill places in South Orange County where I lived. I had some of the most beautiful backcountry trails that I'd road bike on, and they were just, I can remember going out there and you'd be talking with road runners and with cats named Bob, and one day that the deer decided it was going to wait and race me just so it could prove that it was faster than this guy on a bike. I love that stuff. Around here, you'd probably end up getting a deer tick if you hunt around the deer too long. There are people, you go any place and there are people that live their entire lives in that place absolutely happy. So there are people that can deal with LA traffic like that, and they just say, hey, it's a part of the commute. And I did for 20 years. But, when COVID hit and all that got shut down, there was also a part of me that was just, it was relief. Yeah, there's sadness. I miss my classes. I miss my students. I miss the inspiring interactions of seeing them take something you've talked about and then make something stellar out of it. But the fun part is my cousin is also into this hobby. At some point, Sky and his Sky's models, you'll see just Sky can focus in a way I can't focus. And like every day he'll take Catafron robots and build them in an afternoon, and they'll look so nurgle and amazing. And I can never be that messy, so I'm completely jealous. For me, it's more of a meticulous hobby. For Sky, it's this kind of technique challenge of I want to make some, wanting to make something like John Blanche. Well, it's a great job of it. So, trying to mimic a style. I have a real tough time getting messy because I'm always so dang meticulous. But I may not be getting inspired by my students right now. You find other people that you inspire or get inspired by, and you get that fill. But frankly, just not having to deal with that LA commute has been a dream. Just trying to avoid a sneeze, probably because I got some plastic in my nose. Don't inhale plastic, ladies and gentlemen. I don't want to sneeze, so I might have to do a farmer blow there. Apologies to those who do not know the concept of a farmer blow, but a farmer blow is when you got gross, dirty hands and you don't want to blow your nose. So you just kind of blows a nostril with your arm or your sleeve and then you just blow. And yes, some of you are like, that's gross. Yep. People do worse, especially guys. So get over it. And I don't know if that's even fair. I say especially guys. I'm sure everyone does things when people aren't around and they're not putting on a scene. So if you're not trying to impress somebody, you'll fart in front of your cat or your dog, fart on the dog. I don't know. You do whatever you can. People are going to do what they're going to do. Well, just walking around, monkeys that got a little more clever. Oh, doop doop doo doo. I feel like I'm missing a couple. This is such a large piece. I feel like I'm missing some stuff on it. Oh, I'm missing so many. I can see them all over here. It's probably one of those places for something like this to be a lot more aggressive. In the background, you can hear family member talking baby talk to one of the cats. Cool. Oh man, I missed some. One of the challenges when you have big pieces kind of like this, where there's just so many. I mean, it's kind of amazing that they did it this way, but there's so many contours, internal contours, another internal contours. By the way, these little veins, these are the things I will break so easily if I'm not careful. Um, the kind of Judge Dredd knee pads, which is kind of cool to see actually. Um, I wish they'd make a Judge Dredd model. That'd be so cool. Um, I had them back in the day. But when you get to a piece like that, it can be really tough to find all those pieces. Sometimes it just means coming back to it a few minutes later and then just trace the line and just see. You'll probably find another place that you missed, but you get so fixated on it that you can't see in the moment. And some of you, I'm not sure if you're artists or not. What you're turning into something like this, you're at least a hobbyist as an artist. Um, which my students is a lot. One of the problems is we get all focused when we're working on something. It gives us tunnel vision, and we get so into the tunnel vision, we stop seeing the stop seeing the big picture. You're so focused on the little minutia. So I'm not thinking about the big picture because I'm thinking about this little bit of fabric here. And imagine you're doing that on like a film, or you're doing something like software development, you're in code and you're so into the algorithm that you're not seeing the big picture. And so you miss some larger, like, you know, underlying like revelation in the keep it simple, uh, you know, goal. And then you make something way more complicated than it needs to be, or you make it wrong because you forgot the one simple thing at the front end that would have affected it. Then you have to redo it. People in drawing, they'll get fixated on something like hands or feet, and they'll get it perfect and then realize it's out of proportion for the body or not in the right location relative to the body. And so that can be, so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going over it one more time. I'm just going to start right here at the stem. I'm just tracing out, seeing if there's any. Make sure I don't put too much weight on anything. There's a little bit on the end of that. Oh, a little bit right there too. But you get so focused, tunnel vision, that you stop. It's like you have to go back to a wide angle view. So it's like we tunnel up and we'll stay there, but we have to always remember to like breathe in, breathe in, breathe out. Like, that's kind of the workflow as an artist that you should really keep into a, keep your objectivity. Otherwise you just get too focused on little tiny details and you miss out on the bigger parts. So sometimes if you get to that point, me putting this piece down a few minutes ago was me doing that. Just breathe, dang it, breathe. Take a step away from it, come back and look at it. Oh, there's a little bit on the foot. See, I knew I was going to have this. I knew I was looking at it. I could feel it. I could literally feel myself like, just, I'm in the 4th model down of all 5. It's like I'm close, but I'm not done yet. Just not making good choices because you're tired. You're getting through it a little bit. You're not seeing the model. So take a step back. It just takes a couple minutes and boom. Sometimes getting coffee is enough. Going and getting a soda. I don't know, whatever your thing is. Oh, at some point I forgot to get his little, he's got his little cloak. Is his cloak made from 2 different head pieces? It is. Look at that. What the heck is that other piece? Well, that is just cunning. Oh man. Okay. Well, I've been building the wrong one. Da, 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 da. If you haven't noticed here, I think I built the wrong one. Yep, I did. Cool. Well, okay, that's this guy 22. 23 is, so let's just figure here. Let's put this away. He'll come back. So what are we missing from this character? We got this part here, 20. We got the sniper rifle there, boom. 21. We got the combat blade, 19. 18. 18 is the guy with the little cloak, and it's still got the little trees, but just not the same tree. So, by the way, that is an example of, like I said, getting tired. There's times where I used to go to the GW near my house in Orange County. I'd get there at 10 in the morning, spend until 3, just nonstop and some stuff out. Listening to other people, I'd actually get really quiet. It's true. I actually get really quiet when I do the hobby stuff. Most of the time, I would do a lot less talking and just sit there in my little zone doing my thing. And 2 o'clock, lunchtime, and then might be about a half hour. We would all come back, and then from 2:30 until 6 o'clock, I would just continue doing some of this. There's times where I'd spend 10 to 6, like 7.5 hours, just putting models together. Now, and if that seems like a long time, when I was doing the paint scheme for my Armies on Parade entry, which was the Night House. That was 5 Imperial Knights, fully magnetized, all their weapon options, and that painting requires like 8 layers of airbrushing. There was a day where I spent 11 hours just standing in my kitchen where I had my spray booth set up, just airbrushing all day. And I didn't take a break. I was going to go to the restroom once. By the end of it, my hand was just completely messed up from just holding the airbrush all day. It had been sweating inside of nitrile gloves all day. Yeah, I say that like I'm complaining, but it was kind of fun. So careful. I could feel one of these almost start to give. It's part of the problem when you're putting pressure on the model to keep it steady. You can sometimes hit something somewhere in a way that's counterintuitive. Now this is a crazy one. This is a sword, but notice it's the end of the arm is on the opposite thing. It looks like he's supposed to hold the sword this way, but that's not it. That's his shoulder, and the sword is tucked in and under the shoulder. And you can see there, that's the blade that interfaces. It fits like in that little socket. So if a person just goes through, how do you get in there? man, these things are built like just awesome science. But you know, when you put together certain models, you're putting so many together because you're building an army. You get to learn the sprue effectively, almost like it's like learning a puzzle. And it becomes something where you get a oh, there's a little knob here. See a dot there. There's a little dot here. So that's there's a little bit of sprue line on this that I missed. Okay. So as I was saying, the 11 hours. When I used to do some of my 3D work and I'd be doing fixes to things, there are times where I would measure my evenings in the amount of Lord of the Rings special editions that I had to sit through. Lord of the Rings special edition, for those of you who know, is about 4 hours, just one movie. Okay, and there's 3 of them. And that's 12 hours. Well, you might say, well, that's a little much to spend there, isn't it? Well, sometimes it's what has to be done. And I can remember spending an evening putting rivets on a model, and it was a pretty complex model operation, but it took little tiny divots. Goes onto a 3D print. 2.5 Lord of the Rings films, so 10 hours. So it's not too long. But then again, when I'm doing grading, sometimes I'll keep a show in the background. That's how I got through all of the Clone Wars series. And the Clone Wars series is good, but there's certain episodes and certain seasons that get a little bit more trying, and especially if you're watching it and you're just wanting to get to the good parts. You're power watching over 2 episodes or something like that for 5 seasons, 100 episodes. So that's already going to work out to like 50 hours of time. You know, if you try to sit down and watch it all at one time, it's a little ridiculous. But when I'm grading, there's times where it just on in the background, you step away when you hear some, oh, this is an episode but this person shows up, or this is this. You get through it. But sometimes you zen. So for me, 11 hours working on an airbrush. At the end of it, I had some amazing looking models. And then I had to spend probably 2 other weekends just going through painting, edging, put all the lead belcher around it, do the washes, do the highlights. So if you love your hobby, you'll do the time and you'll find the time. And even if it just burns you out a little bit and you have to take a break afterwards, you'll figure it out. But like I said, this isn't that bad of a build, but you know, you get a little bit of fatigue in there. And so that's where I made the mistake. Easy mistake. It just meant I caught it before I glued it together, but I wouldn't have had a big problem with gluing it because it was like, oh, it didn't really fit together. I'd be, you know, it's more the question mark was starting to appear. But yeah, you can just see. Yeah. Have to be careful using that term or everyone's gonna think it's certain. You're gonna think they lost on a certain game show. Would be actually do right where they got it down. The minor chord. And again, you know, I apologize if this is too quiet. I might have to get near the mic and turn up the audio in future installments of this type of stuff. We'll figure it out. I'll listen to it when this is all done. Only, if we ever do this on something like a Twitch or something like that, and then people are wanting me to give feedback, I'd love to, but I'll have to have like some dude that just becomes like a servitor that sits around here and says, says what people are thinking so I can respond to it, because I can tell you right now, it'd be really difficult for me to read anything while I'm kind of in the zone. Respond and give an opinion on almost anything, but it's easier to give an opinion with your brain in your mouth than it is reading it and then formulating it with text. Oh. Sneeze. Okay. Oh. I'm gonna be having a fun time, I'm sure, when I get to the sisters, because one of my favorite audiobooks is Our Martyred Lady, and just an absolute joy to listen to. And holy cow, they made this guy so you can have him with a cloak over his head or have him without a cloak over his head. That is ridiculous. So you got two heads. He's got the Emperor Palpatine going on right here. Excellent, Lord Vader. Yeah. I don't know if anyone can see that right there, but that's totally like Palpatine look. And then you got this one, which has like Palpatine, but he got like his head caught in a turbine. But that is a different version of the same head. Oh, Jesus. Okay. Make sure I didn't damage it. Nope. But this one is kind of captivating. He's got these like little V chamfers on the back, and it fits together and looks, this is crazy. It's like he's wearing the cloak kind of off the back of his head with the big old beard. Normally, I hate that kind of stuff because it's hard to paint. I'm not that good of a painter, right? But here's the thing. When you think about something, you can't stop it. Palpatine, he looks like he could be a Grey Knight head, or he looks like he could actually be a good inquisitorial guy. Okay, I normally would love that head. This reminds me of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert, and the moment I say that it went in my head, I was like, oh crap. Even if it's harder to paint, you got to do the Obi-Wan Kenobi in the desert. Just because I wish he'd actually talk like that. Like, oh, what's this guy's name? Scout Sergeant Owen McCall. That kind of sounds like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay, cool. So Owen McCall, you're gonna look like, I'm gonna make you into Obi-Wan Kenobi. And at that point, how do I not make you be the model, damn it? Way to go, Games Workshop. I wonder if somebody was thinking that when they put this together, because that is pretty dang awesome. But yeah, you got a little Palpatine head on the sprue. So if you're wondering what these sprue bits are, you're like, wait, I want an Obi-Wan Kenobi. In the Gaunt Ghost sprue, it is the Emperor Palpatine head is sprue number 26. And if you want to do the Obi-Wan Kenobi with his cloak kind of hanging back a little bit, it's like 29 and 28. Are you a heretic, Ezra Bridger? I don't know how Obi-Wan Kenobi would. He did fight for the Clone Wars, and that was a pretty fascist, like, takeover of the Republic. So they say, would Obi-Wan Kenobi fight for the Inquisition or for the Imperium of Man? Well, I guess it depends on what. Fighting a droid army versus fighting chaos. The Sith are pretty much like a very, very small chaos cult, right? And they're already using the Force, which would pretty much be like psychic powers. So I guess if Obi-Wan Kenobi and I were getting into a really weird crossover question here, but I guess if that was your only option, I guess you'd probably help to defeat chaos, but at the same time, you'd also probably not be wanting to get too involved with Ordo Hereticus and other people that would just as soon, you know, submit or die. And I don't think a Jedi would want to do uh, exterminatus on a planet. So, meanwhile, Mr. Palpatine here, he'd make a good Inquisitor. Actually, probably make a terrible Inquisitor. He'd become a Chaos Lord because he would do the exterminatus, but he'd be doing it for his own power, and that would immediately be seen as very much a Gauge Van Dyer path by the Imperium of Man. I think he'd probably get a very, very swift response from somebody like Katerina Greyfax. It wouldn't be very fun. Now, somebody would say, yeah, but Emperor Palpatine would totally beat Greyfax. Well, here's the thing. He might have the power, but Katerina Greyfax, she did technically stand up. Now, she had a Gellerfield, but she did technically stand up to a greater demon of Zinch. So, and let's just be clear. Inquisitors don't fight fair. They take over whole star systems. And if you were to bring the size of the Imperial fleets to bear against, in Star Wars, you'd end up having like viral bombardments of the Death Star. So you'd have a super weapon, but you'd have people horribly mutating because of viral stuff on board the Death Star. Like, they don't fight fair. They fight against the apocalypse. Like, the Imperium is they're not fighting for personal power. They're fighting for the survival of mankind against the darkest threats the universe has. And they have for thousands of years. They don't fight fair. And oh, the Imperium has AT-ATs? Cool. Have you seen Imperial Titans? When a AT-AT falls over, it falls to the ground. when an Imperial Titan falls over, it goes nuclear and wipes out half a continent. So the point of this random tangent is, while in Star Wars, you can have somebody like the Emperor, his little schemes and agendas, I don't quite see how his schemes and agendas would really work well with a galaxy spanning empire. It was good enough he took over he schemed and got to the Senate but there's no Senate. So you might have power. Like, how would the emperor confront somebody like Abaddon or Horus? Like I said, there's odds and stakes. And when you have somebody that's a superhuman demigod, that's not something that you really have to go up against in the Star Wars pantheon, which is primarily people. You might have some cool technologies, but it's people. It's not interdimensional gods that feast on your soul. So, looks like a pretty cool Obi-Wan. I kind of like that look. And the little Emperor Palpatine here. He'll go to some other purpose downstream. Cool. The only problem's missing is he's a guy with a lovely lasgun as well, and I forgot it. And again, look, check out the back of this. All that texture and detail is the negative space of that texture and detail right there. If you didn't want to have this on here, you could leave it completely off. I love these models. It's just well, what I'm hearing in the background means I may have to go watch some shows in a little bit here. Between Loki being on and The Bad Batch being on. And I never watched it, but I'm finally starting to get caught up with Jack Ryan. The reason I didn't get into Jack Ryan was because some of the people at the hobby store were jerks, and they decided that they were going to try to spoil it the day after it came out. So I got pissed and decided not to. Well, I'm kind of talking. I'm kind of talking. Mike's on. It's all right. Are you wanting to watch the show? Okay, well, give me a couple minutes to finish up the last one and then we'll do it. Cool. It is a good setup, yeah. We'll have to see how it sounds. As I was saying, that is crazy good design skill that puts that together so easy. And they even have like the Aquila coming through the leather straps of the rifle. And you get a little Obi-Wan head. The free Emperor Palpatine head. One last guy. Give me like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay, last guy. Do, 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 do. I mentioned versus Abaddon. If we even take the idea of Custodes, who stood motionless for a century in front of the Emperor. I don't know if a Jedi can necessarily deal with that level of things, or Grey Knights, or here's a crazy one. If you think of psychic powers as force powers, where in Star Wars do we have something the equivalent of the Sisters of Silence, who literally just by standing because of the pariah gene, they literally stand next to a psychic organism and neutralize the psychic powers. They have to be kept on the moon because just their presence will dim the Astronomicon. So yeah, I know it's totally nerdy thought process. Not like Star Wars or Star Trek better, but at some point, if we are going down that little tangent hole of comparing stuff, like I said, 40K just feels like it plays at an unfair level. Star Wars is kind of noble chivalry of samurais and even Sith are still like bringing out their swords and having their duel. You don't get duels in 40K. You get, you know, you get sanctioned for assassination, and you get by you get sanctioned by for assassination by psychically nullifying, you know, creations designed to shoot lasers from their sombrero hat at you, or you get, viral bombardment of entire planets. They don't need to find you. They just know, the threat's big enough. Boom. Um, Same thing with somebody like Grand Moff Tarkin. He might have the severity of an Imperial officer, and he might even have some of the same great dialogue. But imagine somebody like Grand Moff Tarkin versus somebody like a Katrina Greyfax for ruthlessness, or even, an entire division of the sororitas and their faith in guns and, advocating the Order Hereticus, putting their own people into penitent engines, or having them go onto the field of battle with no weapons, just prove your faith to the Emperor with purity seals. And they do this willingly, some of them. So it just, both franchises are fun, but they've got last one. We're almost done. This is great. I think just the blade, and then we just get to glue them all together, and then we're done. I'm going to figure out later whether I'm using the mechanic or the Necromunda bases, or whether I'm going to use the other bases. But let's get to this guy. Okay, so last guy, the autocannon dude here. Okay. Sword onto cloak. I think I see the sword. The dot, little dots on the sword, little dot there. Come on, little dude. Up, up, up. Max, you don't need to help, man. You may, I don't know if any of you caught it, but you may have seen a giant, very pretty, but too curious for his own good cat walk across the table. He is looking for things to climb. In fact, now you're probably noticing the camera shaking because he wants to climb on the camera. He is a climbing cat, and you can hear the little tinkling of his thing as he tries to get into trouble. That is a crazy little sword that goes through that character there. Put some glue on stuff. Be sealed because I didn't put enough glue on it before. You don't need much. but I just want to make sure that I get the welds pretty solid. You go, dude. Okay. Okay. And as per usual, they usually go with the feed arm first. There's a little lock pin right there that kind of goes up against it, and that keeps it kind of keeps it engaged. Notches right up into there. It looks like the regular padding, the kind of gingerbread shoulder pad padding he's got there. And then we're gonna have a little bit more like in here. And at some point, we're going to figure out where he holds onto the gun, and it's the front of the handle here goes to the back of the handle here. Get that later, but you can see it kind of drops in there. All right. I'm going to put a little bit more in here like that. Seal it up. And this little front peg goes, so it's holding it from below. Not quite the most comfortable. Not the most comfortable way to hold it, but kind of like the same kind of field dressing they used to do, where they you could put 50 cal machine gun with a bit of a like a run a bit of a wire strap around it, and you could then run and gun with them. I think I saw that show, the Pacific. One guy was talking about it with. He went back to do basic training. So there you got Mr. Rage. Go, 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 go. And that is Gaunt's Ghost. We'll figure out, like this guy, he fits pretty well on this one. Maybe they'll fit on those 25s. If they don't, these guys are supposed to be on a forest. So then what I'll probably do is just use these and put some grit sand on them. But very, very cool. Okay. Yay, there we go. Little Palpatine head. Palpatine's invisible. That's it. That's what I got for today. So thanks for tuning in, and see how this evolves in the future. Peace out.